Our scripture today is from the book of Psalm 1 through 4 and 14 through, book of 1 through 4 and 14 through 16. You who live in the shelter of the Most High, who abide in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. Those who love me I will deliver. I will protect those who know my name. When they call to me, I will answer them. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue them and honor them. With long life I will satisfy them and show them my salvation. May God add the blessing to the reading of his words.
Thank you, Diane. So for the past few weeks, we have been looking at different people's views of the Promised Land, using Moses and the Israelites as an example and their journey to the Promised Land, and Martin Luther King's speech where he said, I have been to the mountaintop and I have seen the Promised Land. We have had some great messages on views of the Promised Land, and I have struggled as I was like, what is my view? I've thought and thought about the Promised Land. And I guess that my view is of the ultimate Promised Land. And a good description of that, in my opinion, is from Revelation 21:4. He will wipe away from them every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Neither will there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore. What a wonderful view of that land, of that Promised Land. But here on earth, sometimes we may have a difficult time imagining that, especially if we're going through tough times. The Israelites were in this predicament. They had been slaves for 400 years in Egypt. According to Ed Robb, author of a book called Mountaintop Moments, they had almost forgotten God during this time period. They were living in a land where there was worship of many gods. And they were treated very badly as slaves. So they were frightened, especially during their escape from Egypt. They were frightened of the future. They were frightened more of the future than they were of where they were, of their enslaved past. More frightened of the future than where they were. So it was hard for them to go on. They had forgotten who they were, the beloved children of God. Children of God. Exodus 14, verses 10 through 13 tells us about this moment that they had such fear. As Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them. In great fear, the Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us alone and let us serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness. So have you ever been there? Where you feel that the future is uncertain and scarier than the current situation, even if you're in a not so good situation? The future sometimes seems scary. You can't see beyond the present. Been there. Maybe you're there. You've been there or you're there now. Maybe you're nervous about potential changes in the church as we go through this MKI process. Change is hard for all of us. Sometimes we'd rather stay than move forward. But Moses goes on to give the people a glimpse of the promised land. In verse 13, he says, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance the Lord will accomplish for you today." They had no idea what was going to happen, but they had to trust in God. We also get glimpses of the promised land here on earth. But I also know that the journey can be hard, difficult to navigate, and full of detours, just like the Israelites that wandered for 40 years in the desert, in the wilderness. And just as African Americans knew after Martin Luther King was assassinated, they knew that there was more difficult times ahead. Last week, Bill gave us a look at some ways to make it to the promised land. Patience and perseverance, relationships and family, and following God's lead. And I want to continue on this idea of the journey. What if you're in a situation that you just can't see beyond it? You can't even think about the future. You're scared. Sometimes when we're scared, we get so consumed by the situation that when we really need to get up and go, as God tells us to do, but we become stagnant and paralyzed. Psalm 91 can give us a glimpse of how these difficult, frightening, and maybe paralyzing parts of the journey to the promised land. The psalmist starts by giving us a picture of how God helps us. It says, "He will deliver you from the snare of the fowler." And one commentary said this represents all the dangers, disasters, all the different kinds of things we go through, and even potentially the demonic influences. Okay. He goes on to say he will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. So this picture of a goose with the goslings underneath, this represents the wings of God covering you and helping you through this time period. The next picture is a picture of a jacana. It's a tropical bird. And you can see that not only does it cover its young with its wings, it actually picks them up and carries them. You can see all the little legs hanging down from the babies. So this is true protection under the wings. The ultimate protection. A parent bird, though, can actually make itself a target by covering its young like this and trying to protect them. For a local bird, we have a bird called a killdeer that nests on the ground. And if a predator or somebody, a person, comes close to that nest, that killdeer parent will act like it has a broken wing, and it'll hang its wing down and kind of walk away from the nest, trying to get the predator to follow it. Okay? To follow it away from the nest, to protect the nest and the young. Well, when you think about that, either in this situation or the killdeer, the parent is actually putting themselves in harm's way. The killdeer could get caught by the predator if they're not really paying attention. The jacana is not going to be able to move as quickly if it's carrying all young underneath its feathers. So it actually, it could be deadly to the parent. And it may be the ultimate sacrifice in defense of the nest. So God is covering us. And He will carry us. He is providing that ultimate protection for us. And God's Son, Jesus, made that sacrifice for us. The future for us is the promised land because of the sacrifice of Jesus. One more bird picture. You know I like my birds. Some of you know that. This eagle. There's actually a video of this nest that's speeded up, but this eagle sat through a raging storm all night and never left the nest, covering the eggs or the young. It would get up occasionally and shake off some snow and set right back down, but it didn't run off. It didn't go seek shelter for itself. It stayed to protect its young through the storm. And when we experience storms in our life, God stays for the long haul. He's with us all the time, even when we can't feel it. The psalmist goes on to say that you will find refuge. Of course, me, being a biologist, I think of a wildlife refuge, where they protect the habitat, which provides all the needs of the animals, and the animals are protected as well. God is a refuge for us. We are provided that safe haven, and through the church and through the community of the people, God uses the people of the church to represent Him here on earth. This community can provide comfort and as messengers of God. There are many examples of God's protection in this psalm. Verse 11 says, "For He will command His angels concerning you, to guard you in all your ways." Verse 14 says, "I will deliver you." Verse 15, "When they call to me, I will answer them. I will be with them in trouble. I will rescue them." Now we know that bad things happen to people. We're on earth. We're not in that promised land yet. John 16:33 gives Jesus' words and says, "In this world, you will have trouble." Okay, we're going to have trouble. But then he says, "But take courage. I have conquered the world." God will provide that comfort and protection for us. He will conquer the world. We will get to that promised land. He provides comfort and protection through Scripture and prayer and through people, through the people of this church, of His community. Lauren Daigle is an artist, songwriter, and she has a song that tells us how to survive struggles and hardships of the world. She is talking to God in this song. And she says, "Where are you now when darkness seems to win? Where are you now when the world is crumbling? I hear you say, 'Look up, child, look up.' Where are you now when all I feel is doubt? Where are you now when I can't figure it out? But I hear you say, 'Look up, child.'" Sounds better when she sings it. But look up. When we're at our lowest is when we need to be looking up. Looking up to God for His protection. So I have been going through a really difficult time the last few months. Sorry. One where I have struggled to see a positive outcome. Pastor Erica gave me this prayer shawl and prayed over it. And I put this prayer shawl on every morning. When I get up, I drink my coffee, and I read, and I pray. And I put this shawl on when I am desperate for some peace. And when I put it on, I can feel the presence of God. And I can feel the prayers of the people. And many people in this church have prayed for me. But sometimes I can't pray. So the prayers of people are important. But when I can't pray, I'm sorry, it's too hot for this right now. When I can't pray, sometimes all I can do is I start thinking about things I am grateful for. And it's simple. It may be a bed, my coffee. I like my coffee. It may be family, friends. But that is the way that I realize that God has provided for me and God has brought comfort to me. Sometimes all I can do is repeat a scripture over and over and over again. And one that I pray a lot happens to be the scripture for the Mission Vision team, and it's now posted in the hallway out there. And I have had days where literally all day long is I just say this over and over again. It's all I can do. Jeremiah 29:11. For surely I know the plans I have for you. Plans for welfare and not for harm. For a future with hope. Hope. Our previous pastor, Melissa, was preaching on a movie, the Star Wars movie. And she said about 4 statements that just stuck with me, and I wrote them in my bulletin, and I've kept the bulletin in my Bible. And she said these 4 things. The darkness has not stomped out the light. Sometimes we feel like we're just enveloped in darkness, but the light is still there. The second one, there is always hope. There is always hope. The third thing, the story isn't finished yet. The promised land is out there for us. It's not finished. And the last one is that God will deliver you. God will deliver us. Even though we still have to go through these journeys that go through darkness, we can come out of this stronger. We can see the promised land, and we will get to the promised land. I want to finish with the words of Moses to the Israelites as they prepared to go into their promised land. Now remember, Moses could not go into the promised land with them, but he was encouraging them as they got there. In Deuteronomy 31:6, he says, "Be strong and bold. Have no fear or dread of them, because it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not fail you or forsake you." He will not fail you. God will rescue you and me. We have to seek Him through Scripture and prayer and each other. We have to look up, child. Amen.